It is early December 1941. Night. Somewhere west of Moscow, a German soldier stands watch in the dark. He has been fighting since June. His uniform is buried under a civilian coat taken from a Russian village because no winter clothing was ever issued. The army didn't need it because the war was supposed to be over. His rifle lubricant froze this morning. He packed the mechanism with grease stripped from a farm wagon. Whether it will fire when he needs it to, he doesn't know. What he can see, looking east, is the slow, white sweep of Soviet anti-aircraft searchlights moving across the Moscow sky. Gun flashes on the horizon. The pulse of anti-aircraft fire over a city his commanders have been promising him for 5 months. Some of the men in his unit say they can see the spires of the Kremlin. Perhaps they can. Perhaps the cold and the darkness are playing tricks. But Moscow is close. Close enough to see its guns against the clouds. He believes he's about to win the war. So what didn't he know? He didn't know that German intelligence had assessed the Soviets as having no reserves left, and that German intelligence was catastrophically wrong. He didn't know that behind the Soviet lines, an army was assembling. An army that, as far as anyone in his chain of command was aware, simply did not exist. He didn't know that the intelligence which helped make that army possible had come from a German journalist sitting at a bar in Tokyo. And he didn't know that in less than 72 hours, the ground beneath his boots was going to explode. Moscow was not simply the capital of the Soviet Union, as it was the knot that held the entire logistical body together. Every major rail line in the country converged on it. Capture Moscow, and the arteries that move troops, ammunition, and food across 1/6 of the Earth's surface are cut. Not just a city lost, a system destroyed. Berlin understood this. The original invasion plan, Operation Barbarossa, called for the capture of Moscow within 4 months. 4 months to end the Soviet state before winter, before the world had time to react. Hitler had publicly proclaimed that the Soviet regime would crumble like a house of cards. By the autumn of 1941, he was nearly right. On June 22nd, Axis forces crashed across the Soviet border along a front 1,500 miles wide. The Soviet Air Force was destroyed on the ground in the opening hours. 3 million men, 3,550 tanks, and 2,770 aircraft pushing east in the triple columns of Blitzkrieg. They advanced 450 miles in the first month. In July, Smolensk fell. The ancient fortress on the road to Moscow, gone. The Wehrmacht had never moved this fast, this far. No army in modern history had. The war was going exactly as planned, or so it appeared. Smolensk is 230 miles from Moscow. With the city exposed and the Soviet center reeling, the logic of the campaign pointed east. But in the summer of 1941, Hitler looks at the map and turns south. Ukraine, its grain, its manganese, its industrial base. And behind the German flanks as they drive toward Moscow, Soviet armies that could not be left in place. When Field Marshal Walter von Brauchitsch, Commander-in-Chief of the army, argues for a direct thrust at the capital, and he is told that only ossified brains would think of such a thing, Hitler redirects Army Group Center's armored forces toward Kiev. One of the men watching this decision is General Feldmarschall Fedor von Bock, a 60-year-old Prussian soldier who commands Army Group Center. His soldiers call him Der Sterber, the deer, because of what he demands from the men who serve under him. He is not a man who expresses himself loosely. He begins recording the Kiev decision in his diary. He will still be writing about it when the campaign ends. That reckoning comes later. For now, he watches and records, and the transfer orders are issued, and the armored columns turn south. The Kiev operation succeeds, by any conventional measure. In September 1941, 4 Soviet armies are encircled east of the city. More than 600,000 prisoners, and a triumph on paper. Berlin celebrates. Heinz Guderian, whose 2nd Panzer Army drove south to complete the encirclement, writes in his memoirs what he understood at the time. Everything now depended on our ability to achieve expected results before the winter and even before autumn rains. The 6 weeks consumed at Kiev cannot be recovered. The window the Wehrmacht needs to reach Moscow before the ground freezes, before the Soviet state can marshal its reserves, has begun to close. No one in Berlin knows it yet, but the window is closing. October 1st, 1941. Operation Typhoon begins. 2 million men, 75 divisions, 3 of Germany's 4 panzer groups aligned against a Soviet center that has already been bled white. Now, the plan is a double envelopment, pincers driving north and south of Moscow while infantry pushes at the center, designed to annihilate the remaining Soviet armies west of the capital before the city itself is taken. The opening blows are catastrophic. The panzer groups punch through the Soviet lines almost unopposed, swing inward and seal the junctions. By October 10th, 4 Soviet armies are trapped in a pocket west of Vyazma. By the 13th, a second pocket closes at Bryansk. In 10 days, the Wehrmacht encircles and captures roughly 773,000 Red Army soldiers. The figures vary across sources, but the scale is not in dispute. 4 armies gone. The Mudchaisk defense line, the last fortified barrier protecting Moscow's western approaches, is now held by roughly 90,000 Soviet soldiers stretched across hundreds of kilometers. The Georgy Zhukov, pulled from Leningrad to take command of the shattered Western Front, inherits what amounts to a ghost army. He begins building it back from almost nothing. Near the town of Borodino, where Kutuzov had fought Napoleon on this same ground in this same season 129 years before, soldiers from the 32nd Siberian Rifle Division, just arrived by rail from Vladivostok, dig into the frozen earth. They wear fur caps and greatcoats. They are among the first Far Eastern troops to reach the front. They hold for 4 days before being overrun. The road to Moscow is, for a moment, open. October 15th. A secret decree passes through the Soviet State Defense Committee. The government is to evacuate to Kuibyshev on the Volga. The diplomatic corps, the presidium, the people's commissariats. The decree is signed by Stalin. Its final lines assign to the NKVD the task of mining and destroying everything in Moscow that cannot be removed: warehouses, factories, bridges. The Moscow metro, the pride of the Soviet state, is to be rigged for demolition. On the morning of October 16th, the metro does not open for the first time in its history. The stations are dark, the trains are still. The word spreads through the city like fire. What follows is a collapse of public order that lasts for days. Factory workers load handcarts with documents and whatever they can carry, pushing them through streets already jammed with vehicles. NKVD men burn files in the courtyards of ministry buildings, the smoke rising over the Moskva River, visible for miles. At the bridges, crowds press forward, trying to get out before the Germans arrive. Looting breaks out, and shops are smashed. There are riots. In the streets, some people shout pro-Nazi slogans. A city that has been told for years it stands at the vanguard of history is watching that history evacuate east. Quietly, in the early morning darkness, Lenin's embalmed body is removed from the mausoleum in Red Square, where it has lain on public display since 1924, wrapped carefully, loaded onto a train and shipped east. The founder of the Soviet state, sent for safekeeping while the state he founded fights for its life. Moscow has roughly 90,000 troops defending it. German forces are less than 80 miles away. Joseph Stalin is 62 years old, ashen with exhaustion, relocated to a bomb-proof office inside a metro station while his government evacuates around him. And in the preceding 4 months, he has watched his armies destroyed in pockets from Ukraine to the Arctic Circle. A train is waiting to take him to Kuibyshev, where his Kremlin apartment has been recreated in an underground bunker near the Volga. 4 Douglas DC-3 aircraft sit on standby at a Moscow airfield. Every physical preparation for his departure has been made. He reads, a biography of Mikhail Kutuzov, the general who abandoned Moscow to Napoleon rather than destroy his army defending it. He considers what Kutuzov chose and what it cost him and what it ultimately meant. The exact moment of his decision is not recorded with certainty. One account, unverified, persistent across the historical literature, places him on the platform of the waiting train, standing in the dark, not boarding, walking away from it. But whether it happened precisely that way cannot be confirmed. What is documented and decisive is that he does not leave. He asks Zhukov directly, can Moscow be held? Zhukov answers yes. Stalin had spent 15 years eliminating everyone around him capable of filling the space he occupied. There was nothing beneath him that would hold if he moved. The authority binding the Soviet war effort together ran through one man. That man stayed. On October 19th, Stalin issues the decree. Moscow is placed under a state of siege. Movement at night is prohibited without special permits. Provocateurs are to be shot on sight. The NKVD moves through the city. The panic begins slowly to subside. The city does not fall, but the Germans have not stopped. On the other side of the Soviet Union, across Siberia, past the Ural Mountains, they passed the steppes and the vast silence of Central Asia. A different contest is being conducted in the lounges and dining rooms of Tokyo. At the bar of the Imperial Hotel, a man named Richard Sorge is drinking. He is tall, broad-shouldered, conventionally handsome in a European way. He is, officially, a German journalist, charming, witty, the kind of man who gets invited to dinners at the German embassy, who cultivates friendships among ambassadors and military attachés. He has been in Tokyo for nearly a decade. His code name is Ramsey. He works for Soviet military intelligence. Since June 1941, Stalin has been haunted by a nightmare that has nothing to do with the battle in front of Moscow. The Japanese Kwantung Army sits in Manchuria on the eastern border of Soviet territory. So if Japan attacks from the east while Germany attacks from the west, the Soviet Union fights on 2 fronts simultaneously with no ability to move forces between them. That arithmetic, if it comes true, is unsurvivable, which is why more than a dozen infantry divisions, cavalry divisions, and over 1,000 tanks have been frozen in the Soviet Far East since the first days of Barbarossa. They cannot move west without gambling that Japan will not attack, and that gamble, with Japanese intentions unclear, with German pressure mounting daily, is one Stalin has refused to make. Sorge's assignment is to find out what Japan intends. On September 14, 1941, he transmits a message to Moscow. The Japanese leadership decided not to begin hostilities against the Soviet Union this year. In October, he sends what will be his final operational report. The Soviet Far East can be considered safe from Japanese attack. In the weeks that follow, the transfers begin. 15 infantry divisions, 3 cavalry divisions, 1,700 tanks, 1,500 aircraft, moving west from Siberia and the Far East toward Moscow. But the record here must be clear. The counteroffensive that pushes the Germans back draws primarily from an enormous wave of newly mobilized Soviet units recruited and trained across the Urals and on the Volga, not from the Far Eastern transfers alone. Sorge's intelligence was genuine. The transfers were real, but the battle would be decided by Soviet mobilization at scale, by reserves that German intelligence had told Berlin simply did not exist. Sorge helped unlock the East. He did not win the battle alone. And 1 month after his final message, Sorge is arrested by Japanese security services. What happens to him next? Hold that. November 7th, 1941. Red Square. Stalin stands at the reviewing platform on the Lenin Mausoleum. Soldiers in winter coats, greatcoats and quilted jackets, the fur-lined Ushanka hats of the Russian winter, march past the Kremlin walls in column, past the red banners hung for the anniversary of the revolution. Then they turn east, not to barracks, not to training grounds, to the front. Some of them will be dead within the week. The signal is precise. Moscow stands. The government is here. The army is here. 8 days later, the frozen ground hardens, and Typhoon resumes. On November 15th, the German tank armies pushed north and south of Moscow. The pincers of the original plan are grinding forward on roads that have turned from mud to ice. Klin falls on November 23rd, Solnechnogorsk the following day. On November 27th, the 3rd Panzer Group reaches the Moscow-Volga Canal, 37 miles from the capital. The cold by early December is brutal by any measure. The exact temperatures are disputed. German reports claim -45 degrees Celsius. Soviet meteorological records show something considerably less extreme, and the truth lies somewhere between them. What is not disputed is the human reality. The Wehrmacht had not been issued winter clothing. It had been assumed in the planning done in the summer of 1941 that winter clothing would not be required. The war was supposed to be over. The German soldier at the front wears a commandeered Russian overcoat over his uniform, a newspaper stuffed inside his boots. More than 100,000 frostbite cases will be recorded in the army this winter. He stares east at the gun flashes on the horizon. The anti-aircraft fire over Moscow's skyline, the same glow that opened this story. And he believes he is winning. The Soviet soldier facing him wears a quilted Telegraika jacket and felt boots, Valenki, designed for precisely this cold. He has trained in it. He has been waiting in it. The German does not know what is behind those Soviet lines. December 5th, 1941. Colonel General Franz Halder, chief of the German Army General Staff, opens his diary. Von Bock reports, "Our forces are exhausted. The 4th Panzer Group will be unable to continue the offensive tomorrow. German intelligence has assessed the Soviet position as equally spent. The Red Army's reserves, the estimate states, are gone. One more push when the weather eases and the men recover, and Moscow will fall." They are wrong. In the pre-dawn hours of December 5th, artillery from 17 Soviet armies opens simultaneously along the entire length of the Moscow front. Fresh troops from Siberia, from the Urals, from the mobilization that German intelligence never tracked, attack in the dark and the snow. The Red Army has accumulated 58 divisions in reserve by the time Zhukov's counteroffensive is approved. 58 divisions that German intelligence told Berlin did not exist. It is not one thrust, it is everywhere at once. By December 13th, German forces have retreated more than 80 kilometers from Moscow. By January 1942, between 100 and 250 kilometers back. The units that stood 20 miles from the capital are in full retreat, abandoning vehicles they cannot start, burning supplies they cannot carry. Hitler issues directives ordering a defensive stance on the entire Eastern Front. The army that was supposed to march into Moscow in the summer, in fine weather, in triumph, is retreating through the Russian winter. 2 days after the Soviet counteroffensive begins, on December 7th, 1941, Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. The United States enters the war, 2 events, 48 hours apart. The counteroffensive in the East that Germany could not survive. American entry in the West that Germany could not survive. Both connected by a chain of causation running through months of secret transmissions to the intelligence assessments of a German journalist in a Tokyo hotel bar who, by that point, is already in a Japanese prison. The men caught in the middle of either event did not know about the other. More than 3 million soldiers fought at Moscow. Nearly 1.5 million of them died. Soviet casualties in the defensive phase alone exceeded 650,000. German casualties reached 460,000 men. Germany's first major land defeat of the war, the end of Barbarossa, the 12-week plan to finish the Soviet Union, finally and irrevocably over. The long war of attrition, the war Hitler had staked everything on not fighting, is now the only war available to him. The fates of the men in this story have their own accounting. Fedor von Bock is relieved of command in July 1942. He leaves behind a diary. His entry after the failure of Typhoon reads, "All along, and I demanded of Army High Command the authority to strike down the enemy when he was wobbling. Last August, the road to Moscow was open. We could have entered the Bolshevik capital in triumph and in summery weather. The high military leadership of the fatherland made a terrible mistake when it forced my army group to adopt a position of defense last August. Now all of us are paying for that mistake." He spent his military career recording the price of other men's decisions. On May 4, 1945, 4 days before Germany's unconditional surrender, a Royal New Zealand Air Force aircraft strafes his car on a road outside Hamburg. He dies before the war ends. Georgy Zhukov goes on to Stalingrad, to Kursk, to Berlin. In May 1945, he accepts Germany's unconditional surrender in the name of the Soviet High Command. And he returns to Moscow in 1946 to find that his popularity with the Soviet people has made him a liability to the man who gave him Moscow to defend. Stalin assigns him to a series of obscure regional commands far from the capital. He dies in Moscow in 1974 at 77, and Richard Sorge, he is tortured in a Japanese prison. He confesses. He's tried. The Soviets are contacted twice, once to inquire about the case, once before the sentence is carried out. Both times, Moscow's answer is the same. We in the Soviet Union know nothing about any such person as Richard Sorge. The date selected for his execution is November 7th, 1944, the 27th anniversary of the Russian Revolution. The Japanese choose it deliberately. As a taunt, the man who served the revolution is hanged on its anniversary, to abandoned by the state he had spent his adult life protecting. In 1964, 20 years after his death, 3 years before the next revolution anniversary, the Soviet Union posthumously declares him a hero of the Soviet Union. The streets of Moscow in December 1941 are cold and dark and held. Lenin's body eventually comes home to Red Square. The searchlights still sweep the winter sky. In a prison yard in Tokyo, on a November morning in 1944, a man who spent his life in service to a cause that disowned him dies knowing only what he chose to believe, that the city he could never see, whose defense he could never witness, was a place worth protecting. The city held. The man did not.